Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to our first DEAI virtual Lunch and Learn. I'm Heather Bell. I'm the President and CEO of the Orange County Chamber of Commerce. Today's topic is tips and tools to mitigating implicit bias during the hiring process. We have a dynamic team for you today. We're eager to get started, so please hold off any questions until the end of the program. Lastly, I'd like to remind everybody that we are recording today's session and it will be made available on our YouTube channel later today. And before I turn it over, I would like to personally thank Dr. Vicki Sapp, who came to us through our connection with the Hudson Valley SHRM. She is a professor at SUNY Fredonia. However, her bio will be read by our DEAI committee chair, Earl Miller. Earl, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Heather, and we want to welcome you to our first of many Lunch and Learns hosted by the Chamber's DEAI committee. We have a lot to share with you, so just in terms of moving forward, Vicki T. Sapp, PhD, currently serves as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Affirmative Action, ADA Compliance Officer, and Title IX Coordinator at the State University of New York at Fredonia, and an Adjunct Assistant Professor in the Medical Education Department at Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine in Pennsylvania. Dr. Sapp is a native New Yorker from the South Bronx. Her research, scholarship, and advocacy focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as social justice initiatives in higher education and healthcare. She is a highly sought expert nationally and internationally as a speaker, published author, and consultant. We are appreciative to have her with us today. I want to warn you, if you are at lunch, be ready to drop your fork or your sandwich to take notes. Without further ado, Dr. Sapp.
Good afternoon, everyone. I needed to check my time. Good afternoon. I am so happy to be here, and thank you all for inviting me to do this. I really appreciate this. This session that I typically do is an hour long. I've been asked to condense it for a 30-minute session and allowing you all 15 minutes for Q&A. I want you to know it's interactive. So we're going to move, we're going to get this done. I'm gonna ask you to do some things. Thank you so much for turning on your cameras. It's so important that I'm able to see people's faces, right? So I'm not talking to boxes, right? And to know that we're gonna be engaging. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I need to know, do you only see one screen or two? Two slides. One, wonderful, thank you so much. And so I only speak one language, but I like to welcome everyone and use different languages. So hello, right? Welcome, right? Although I'm just speak one language, I can still put that up. I also do my land acknowledgement. My grandmother is Native American, and so I always do my land acknowledgement and also the work that I do. So it's not just about acknowledging the land, but doing work. So I acknowledge the land on which I live and work has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among a number of indigenous people. Many different tribes from across North America are represented in today's population. Many were forcefully relocated to Indian territory under harmful federal policies. I honor, and I always pause here because I know that I'm doing the work to make my grandmothers proud. I honor the diverse indigenous people connected to this territory and commit to being a better steward of the land for future generations. So the work that I do is really predicated on that. I also want to talk about housekeeping. Have a printout of the copy of the activity. We sent that to you. We sent that to you over email, and we also put it in the chat box. So go ahead and grab that. We're going to take a deep dive, and I want you to be actively engaged. I want you to participate. So please turn off any smart devices and be engaged. This is a short session, but I also want you to take care of yourself. What I tell people when I do my work is that there's no blame, shame, or guilt to what we are doing. We're all coming to this space so that we can learn from each other, so that we can understand where our implicit biases are coming from and how it impacts the work that we do, how it impacts our personal life. All of that is tied in together. So I always do group norms. I ask my search committees, because I have the responsibility of training search committee members to do searches. And we have over 100+ searches go on this year alone. And I've trained over 500 faculty and staff, as well as students, to offer them understanding of how implicit bias shows up in the search process. And so one of the things that I ask them to do is to co-construct knowledge together, understanding that they all have their own lived experiences, and they're going to bring that to the space in which they navigate. We're not asking people not to have lived experiences. We want people to bring that. That's how we get the diversity and experience of seeing things differently when we're looking at the applications for these candidates, right? Or when they come in and they do their interviews. We want you to bring that lived experience of understanding and appreciating the value that they will bring to our institution. This is an exciting time for them to want to work for our institutions. And so when they're applying for a position, they want to work here. So we also have to show them that we want them as well. So understanding that. Use I statements. Sometimes when you're working on a search committee, you have different and opposing views, right? And so when something triggers you, I tell people, use I statements. When I hear you say that about a candidate, this is what came up for me. Is anyone else feeling that? Talk from your own experiences, right? So if anything is said that's inappropriate or maybe on a bias type of spectrum, you want to say, when I hear you say that, this is what comes up for me, right? And you're asking the person to give you more understanding and to repeat it, right? Reserve the right to change your mind. There may be something about a candidate that other people share that could assist in you understanding why that person may bring value to your organization. You want to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Sometimes these things are uncomfortable when bias comes up. It could be a very uncomfortable thing, but it doesn't mean that you leave it there. You may have to say something. So you want to have courage to say something, to bring a better understanding. And I always tell folks, start with questions. You know, when you said this about a candidate, what did you mean by that? Can you give me some more of what you mean? And allow the person to explain to you what they're talking about instead of walking away thinking that they were biased against the candidate, right? So you want to do that. Confidentiality. When we do searches, we ask people to be confidential about it. We do not want people to find out that people are applying for positions. When you're on a search committee, there may be some things that are said. You don't want to tell other people what took place. Or when we hire a candidate, we don't want them to say, well, you know, you were candidate number 3, number 1 and number 2 turned us down, so now we went to you. You never want to do that. So you want to practice that confidentiality when you're serving on a search committee. And you also want to suspend judgment, right? You want to suspend judgment. And we'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the 11 ways that bias show up in search committee. Sometimes we're very judgmental on a person's appearance, what they're wearing. You know, I just had a conversation with a colleague at another institution, and she said someone made a comment about a candidate because they had their book that they used to take notes was kind of ripped up. And I'm like, we don't know people's socioeconomic status. Maybe they need this job so that they can have upward mobility, but we want to judge people on their skills, their abilities, and their talents to do the job. So we have to be very careful when we are given feedback in search committees that we are not judging them on stuff that has nothing to do with the job, right? So really understanding that. And I use these pauses throughout because I want you to know that we're about to do something. We're about to be engaged. the best way for you to understand of how to mitigate bias in a search process is to go through some things and to get some greater understanding. So that's why I do this. So go ahead and get your sheet. I gave you this sheet. I also dropped it in the, you received it via email. If you did not print it out, that's okay. We're not gonna run into roadblocks because you didn't print it out. What I want you to do is get a piece of paper, get a scrap paper. And what I'm gonna do is give you 1 minute to look over the privilege group. The middle part is the identity. So I want you to look at that identity and check off if you identify. Check it off if you identify. So the first one is age. Are you in your late 30s to 50s, early 60s? If that applied to you, put a check mark. Go to the next one, race. If you are white, if you self-identify as being white, check that off. And so go down the list. There's only 22. There's definitely much more identities than that. But let's start with these 22. Go ahead and check that off. I'll give you a minute to do that. First activity. And then add them up at the end. You don't have to share this. I share my information. I don't ask you to share yours. Okay. Now what I want you to do is just take 15 seconds to your privilege groups that you checked off and you add them up at the bottom. Look at those marginalized groups to your privilege. Take a moment to look at those. Just 15 seconds. So one of the things that's very important for me is we need to understand where our privilege lies. What does it mean about having privilege, right? We have a lot of misconceptions of what privilege means. Now, I am first generation, low income. I'm the first person in my family to get my undergraduate degree, first person to get my graduate degree, first person to get my PhD in my immediate family. And you know, when you, New York City, low income, housing projects, you know, you think about that and you're like, where's the privilege there, right? Black, right? Woman, right? And I have 14 privileges. When I took this assessment, I have 14 of these 22 privileges. And so really understanding what does privilege mean? And I use videos to assist me with that. Now, this video is a little cheeky, but I like it. It's only 3 minutes and 31 seconds. You have to love when they're short videos. So we're gonna go ahead and watch this. And one of the things that I typically ask people is to write down what resonates with you. And again, we're gonna talk about this. We have the 15 minutes and we'll talk about it. Usually I do it throughout the session, but we're gonna pause and talk about it at the end. But take a moment to look at this video and remember, what are the takeaways and key nuggets that resonate with you in this video?
Hey friends! So I'm trying something different with my setup and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they ask you to help, but you've never built a house before. So it'd probably be a good idea for you to put on some protective gear and listen to the person in charge, otherwise someone's gonna get seriously hurt. Look, I'm helping! It's the exact same idea when it comes to being an ally. An ally is a person that wants to fight for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. We need your help building this house, but you you probably should listen so you know what to do first. Let's do this. So here are my 5 tips for being a good ally. Understand your privilege. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the word privilege, so let me break it down for you nice and easy. Privilege does not mean that you are rich, that you've had an easy life, that everything's been handed to you and you've never had to struggle or work hard. All it means is that there are some things in life that you will not experience or ever have to think about just because of who you are. It's kind of like those horses that have those blinders on. They can see just fine. There's just a whole bunch of stuff on the side that they don't even know exists. So for example, there are currently 29 states where you can legally be fired for being gay, and there are 34 states where you can legally be fired for being trans. Now, as a straight cis woman, those are things that I don't have to ever think about if I don't want to. I'm not going to be fired because I'm straight, and I'm not going to be fired because I'm cis. So it makes sense that before I can fight for the rights of others, I have to understand what rights I have and others don't. That's privilege. Listen and do your homework. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not possible for you to learn if you aren't willing to listen. So you gotta know when to zippa the lippa. I don't know. You get what I mean. But that's the thing that's so cool about social media. There are so many people sharing their stories all around the world and connecting with people that they normally would never get a chance to without the power of the internet. So do your homework. Start reading blogs, tweets, news articles, and stories so that you can get caught up on the issues that are important to the communities that you want to support. Speak up, but not over. If the Fight for Equality was a girl group, the ally wouldn't be the lead singer or the second lead singer. They'd be Michelle. An ally's job is to support. You want to make sure that you use your privilege and your voice to educate others, but make sure to do it in such a way that does not speak over the community members that you're trying to support or take credit for things that they are already saying. This isn't Mario Kart. Stay in your lane. Realize that you're going to make mistakes and apologize when you do. Nobody's perfect. Unlearning problematic things takes time and work, so you are bound to mess up and trip and fall. Okay. But don't worry, you can brush yourself off and get right back up. I'm back up! Just remember that it's not about your intent, it's about your impact. So when you get called out, make sure to listen, apologize, commit to changing your behavior, and move forward. Last but certainly not least, actually the most important thing on this list, is remember that ally is a verb. Saying you're an ally is not enough. You gotta do the work. 1 through 4. 1 through 4. As always, there are links in the video description box to some of the things I mentioned in this video.
Okay. So when you begin to think about that, understanding our privilege, I have 14 of these privileges. It doesn't mean that I am rich. It doesn't mean I had an easy life. It doesn't mean that I had everything handed to me, or I didn't have to work hard, or that I didn't have to struggle, right? We want to listen and do our homework. We want to speak up, but not over the groups that we are trying to support, right? We want to be aware that if we make mistakes, we want to apologize. An ally is a verb. We have to be an ally. We have to take that action, right? So really understanding that. I really like, she did speak about the 29 states of being LGBT. You could be fired, 34 states. After the June ruling of 2020, that was no longer the case. But we also know that even though it is a federal law and that community, the LGBT community, have recourse to do stuff about if they are discriminated against, it doesn't mean that they're not discriminated against. We already see everything that's happening currently with all the state laws that are going on. So we got to be cognizant of that too. So please be aware of that, right? What I want you to take from this video, I want you to take a number of things, but what I want you to take is before we could advocate for the rights of others, we need to understand what rights we have and others do not. That is what is meant by privilege. We don't have to ever experience or live what individuals, these marginalized groups, we see the marginalized groups to our privilege. So really understanding that when we're talking about doing this work, especially when we're talking about being an interviewer and an interviewee, there is a power dynamic. We have a lot of power because we're already working for the organization that individuals are trying to be a part of. So we have power in that dynamic. So it's very important for people to understand that. Now I have this microaggressions are like mosquito bites. How do microaggressions show up, right? People ask that. I understand. I've heard the word microaggression. What does it mean? This is a 1 minute and 31-second video. I love these type of videos. Very short and to the point. Again, please listen to this and take note of
For
what
people who
resonates.
still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love shared.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So what I like to do with this particular video, and I'm hoping that you were able to write down what resonated with you. And I call this low risk because I asked participants, you don't have a guide, but I asked participants to take the poll. So I'm about to launch the first poll, and it has the statements from the video. And what I would like for you to do is click as many resonate with you or someone you know may have experienced this type of microaggression. Go ahead and weigh in. We have 13 participants. Go ahead and weigh in. You can pick as many as you want. Have this ever resonated with you? Has it happened to you, someone you know, a co-worker, a family member, a friend? Go ahead and weigh in. We have one person who weighed in. All right. We're moving kind of slow here. 2. Okay. Yes. 3. Yes. There you go. There you go. 7 out of 13. 8. Oh, I'm loving it. This is what I'm talking about. Being able to be engaging, right? So that we can engage. 9 out of 13. Okay. Thank you. I'm appreciating this engagement. 11 out of 13. Okay. And I believe 2 of us are co-hosts, so we cannot. Oh, 12 out of 13. Okay, everyone is working. And you may be on a device that you can't do it, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is end the poll, and I'm going to share those results so that you can see, right? So now you see where people are. You are well-spoken. 7 out of 13 have heard this. Where are you really from? 8 out of 13. So we can begin to start seeing this. Microaggressions happen all the time. Everything happens for a reason. 9 out of 13. Look at that, right? Look at that. When we talk about those results, we've all experienced this and or know someone and or a family member or a friend. Let's launch the second set of questions. People always say, where are the other set of questions? I want to weigh in on those. So go ahead and weigh in. I couldn't even tell you were gay. Can I touch your hair? It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry Black woman. Astrophysics, or you can just fill in the blank, right? Maybe you should try a less challenging major. Maybe you should try a less challenging job. Maybe this is not the career for you, right? So you can fill in the blank with some of this, right? It looked like he was up to trouble. Okay, I felt threatened, right? Look at that, 9 out of 13. Good. I'm liking your engagement. Thank you for that. We have 12 out of 13 is staying steady. Okay, all right. I'll end that and I'll show you the results of where you are. When we say, have you experienced this? Do you know someone, a family member or a friend? Microaggressions are so common. What I want you to get from this is understanding that if it is so common, why wouldn't it happen in the search process? It's going to happen. especially when you have a search process where they're meeting multiple people on campus and they're going around. The committee may have been trained and you're all set, but then when you open it up for them to go around campus or go around the company and meet other people, anything can happen. And that's why I always say it's so important for everyone to be trained to understand this, right? Everyone to be trained. And these are just examples of stuff. It doesn't mean that these are the only microaggressions that happen or could happen. There can be more, but that video just shows you that it happens all the time. All the time. This could be whether a person is going to take a job or not when they experience some of this, whether they will take the job or not. And so understanding how important it is for us to put it on our radar and bring it to our consciousness. Now, what I want you to do is open up your chat box, go to the bottom of your screen, click on chat box, and I'm going to show you a picture. And I want you to tell me, what do you see in this picture? One word. What do you see? Go ahead. And I need someone to read it out for me because if I open it up, it's going to block the picture. What do you see in this picture? Go ahead and weigh in. Don't be shy. Just write what you see.
Dr. Sapp, I'll read some of the items. It says black and white is one, cow, a skull, earth, a turtle, water
Okay.
and land, a
Okay.
turtle.
All right. Anything else? Thank you. I'm loving the participation. What do you see? Just keep looking at it. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see.
Cow, geoseparation,
Okay.
girl feeding a cow.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So it's a cow. It's a cow. When we talk about the power of illusion, I will say it's a cow. I'm going to outline it. This is the body right here. This is the body. This is the face right here. You have an eye here, an eye there. You have an ear in the shadow over here. You have an ear here. And then you have the snout, the mouth right down here. It's a cow. When I look at this, I see a cow as well. I don't know if it changes, folks, once I outline it. Do you see that? Do you not see it? Go ahead and weigh in. Tell me what you see. Strongly agree? Yes, I can see a cow. Agree? Maybe that could be a cow. Somewhat agree? I kind of sort of see a cow, right? Somewhat. It could be a cow. Now that you pointed it out, it could be a cow. Somewhat disagree. I'm still trying to figure out what I see. Like, what are you talking about, Dr. Sapp? Right? What are you talking about? Right? Disagree. Not sure I see something, but I'm not sure it's a cow. Strongly disagree. No, I do not see a cow. And it's okay, right? It's okay. Thank you for weighing in. You all are doing so great. Thank you. I'm going to share those results. Look where we are. We're all over the leaderboard. All over the leaderboard. And what I tell people is, this is what it's like when you have a microaggression that has taken place. People are like, was that a microaggression? I don't know. I didn't see it. And then you begin to be in dialogue with people. And then some people will say, oh, it's a cow. It's a microaggression. You're right. Because we need to be educated to understand the historical context and where it comes from. Why would that marginalized person, and you see the marginalized groups, to your privilege, why would that marginalized person believe that this is a microaggression? Well, if you don't have any lived experiences and you don't ever have to deal with it, you don't know. So that's why I do this training, to bring it to your consciousness. We need to educate folks so that they understand, why would that person be offended by what you said? Right? Why would that person be offended? So what I want you to do next, because we do have a small group, I'm going to ask you to open up your mics. Open up your mics. Everyone open your mic. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. And what I want you to do is say it loudly and quickly. Say the color, not the word. Loudly and quickly. We're going to work together on this. You've been doing the polls. You've been doing very good.
Red,
Blue,
yellow, Blue, green,
Blue.
brown.
Brown. Blue.
Blue,
Brown.
Blue, brown, red,
red,
yellow, green.
yellow,
Okay, loudly and quickly. I heard someone go loudly and quickly. Go.
red,
Blue, brown, red, yellow, green.
yellow,
Blue,
blue,
green, brown.
yeah, green,
Red, green, blue, yellow, brown.
Brown.
Red,
Yellow.
Brown,
yellow,
yellow,
Say the
green,
color, not the word.
green,
brown,
brown, red,
brown,
blue, yellow,
yellow.
green.
Brown, yellow, blue,
Yellow.
green.
What happened? You can mute yourselves now so we don't have any feedback. What happened? I asked you to say the color, not the word. And I asked you to say it loudly and quickly, right? Some people just read the color. They were good at that, just reading the color. What happened? Now, this activity has been used for over 80 years. And what happens is that when we ask you to do one thing, it's below your subconscious that it's just like when you see a red light, you immediately stop. Well, some of us do. When you see a green light, you immediately go. It's below your subconscious. I don't even know how I got to Fredonia today, and I live an hour away. I live in Buffalo, New York, and Fredonia is an hour, and I don't even know how I got to work, right? Because it's so used to doing it. And this is what we're saying. Our brain fills in the gap so the world makes sense. It's not a problem when we're doing the activity. The problem is when we fill in the gap with all sorts of things. And sometimes these things come from ugly places because it's things that we have learned in the world. And so it's very important to understand that. So I'm going to ask you to give definitions. I want to define some of these words: bias, implicit bias, microaggression, so we can have the same operating definition of what they are, right? But before we do that, we're going to pause. We're going to pause. I want you to let me know, and I think we have a poll for this. When you hear the word bias, does it have a negative connotation or a positive connotation? Negative connotation or a positive connotation when you hear the word bias? Go ahead and weigh in real quick. I'm trying to watch my time. I'm going to be finished in 7 more minutes I need. Negative connotation or positive? All right, let's share those results. 10 out of 11 said negative, 1 out of 11 said positive. Okay, all right, thank you for that. Open up your chat and tell me, what is one word you associate with the word bias? One word you associate with the word bias. Can you read those off for me, Tammy? What is one
Preference,
word?
discrimination, unconscious, judgment, discrimination.
All right, thank you.
Preference, feelings, favoritism.
All right, oh, your participation is off the charts.
Like
I'm liking
me.
this. Thank you. What about one word you associate, well, negative connotation or positive connotation when we talk about the word instinct? Go ahead and rate that. Weigh in on that. One word you associate with the word instinct. All right, good deal, thank you. So I'm sharing the results. You have one person that said it's negative. We have 10 people that says it's positive. Okay. All right. What is one word you associate with the word instinct?
Some of the responses are habit, intuition, involuntary, experience,
Okay.
inherent.
One word. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Implicit.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So what I want to do is go over some definitions, and then we're going to get into the 11 effects of bias when you're talking about the hiring process. I use Cook-Ross definition. I've been trained by Cook-Ross. They've been doing implicit bias for over 30 years. I've been doing DEI work for over 20 years, and this one was the best. I looked at a number of them, and I like this one. So when we talk about bias and when we talk about instinct, it's the same thing. The inclination to judge without question. It is an automatic response from our brain in which we take in information and make a quick judgment about it. It happens with or without our awareness, our intention, or our control. Everyone has bias. We all have it. Having bias doesn't make us bad people. It makes us human. So really understand it's what you do with that bias that we have to be very careful about. When you decide not to hire someone, when you decide not to promote someone, when you decide to be biased in how you pay people, right? It's the actions. Having bias, we all have it. We all have bias. It's what you do, the behavior, right? It's not about your intent, it's about the impact to the person. When we talk about implicit bias, it's the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, and our decisions in an unconscious manner. So we got to bring that to our consciousness. Doing trainings like this, bring it to your consciousness, right? It's activated involuntarily without awareness or intentional control. It could be either positive or negative. Everyone is susceptible. Everyone is. Implicit bias is not based on our exposure to things or our experiences. It's our mind that picks up associations because of disproportionate engagement with marginalized groups. You know what those marginalized groups are. The less experience we have with these groups, the more we draw on associations. We treat in-group members differently than we treat out-group members. So important to understand that. Everyone in our life is not the same. It's about our relationship. If we are human, we are going to have bias. It depends on how it plays out. It's not about your heart, your intent, or your character. Once we know better, we will do better. The impact of our biases on others depends on the role we play in society. You can be an interviewer and an interviewee with the same bias. The impact is different because of the role, right? You decide who gets hired. You decide who gets promoted, right? You can fill in the blank with these two. The power dynamic is so important. It is about the machinery of our mind and how our attitudes and actions impact others. We can be affected and not even know it's happening. That's why we have to continuously educate ourselves. That's why we have to continuously understand that other people are going to point it out to us, and it's going to bring us in to lean into that discomfort and have the dialogue, right? Unconscious bias, when we have shortcuts or schemas that help us make sense of the world, we fill in those blanks. We fill in those blanks. But our shortcuts sometimes make us misinterpret or miss things. That's unconscious bias. That's unconscious bias, right? When we have the basic assumptions, right? So when we have been socialized in a society in which there exists individual, institutional, and societal biases associated with race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and class, right? None of us are immune to the inheriting biases of our ancestors, the institutions that we work for, or the societies in which we navigate. It's there. The characteristics of these forms of biases are invisible, unintentional, they're subtle, and they're usually outside the level of consciousness and awareness. That's why we do this. That's why we do this. When we talk about the association of bias and implicit bias, why is it important to address in the hiring processes and practices? Just what I told you. We don't hire people, right? We may not promote them. We may not see them for opportunities, right? And so understanding these effects in all these different areas, bias is existent, right? All of these different areas is existing. And so we need to understand how it shows up. So what are microaggressions and how often do they happen? Microaggressions are brief and common day daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults towards marginalized groups. This is the work that was done by Dr. Sue and his team, right? 15,000 participants participated in this, and this is what they came up with. Micro assaults are explicit derogatory derogations categorized by primarily a verbal or nonverbal attack meant to hurt the intended person. Understanding that people, this is conscious. They know they're doing it when they're doing name calling, right? We know some of the names that people have been called when we talk about gender and woman, things that people may call that's inappropriate. You know that, right? So when people are doing this, they know what they're doing. What I want to do is put language to it. It's called a micro assault. A micro insult is categorized by communications that convey rudeness and insensitivity and demean a person's marginalized group membership, right? It is frequently unknown to the person who is doing it. So that's why we have to let them know. That's why we have to have the dialogues and the discussions. Micro invalidations are categorized by communications that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person from a marginalized group. It's so important for people to get this. And one of the examples that I use here is I remember in one of my institutions, a person would not call me Dr. Sapp. They just wouldn't do it. They'll call everybody else doctor, but not me. That was a micro invalidation, right? Why are you not calling me Dr. Sapp? I have my degree. I did the coursework. Everyone else calls me Dr. Sapp, right? So really understanding what was going on for that person. Micro invalidations, invalidating my doctorate degree, seeing me as a person with a doctorate degree. What was that about, right? Understanding that. So I'm not going to show this video. This is the one that I'm going to send to you to look at that because I had you take the Harvard Implicit Association test. This video is so good and it will explain to you all of the different things you would need to know from taking that assessment test. I never like to give that assessment test without showing this video. So I'll send this to you later to look at it. Very, very impactful in explaining implicit bias. I also had you take the ACE assessment, the adverse childhood experience. Dr. Burke does a great job in explaining that and how that trauma it represents and change the physiological DNA, right? And that your cortisone's level, continuously experiencing microaggressions, continuously dealing in that fight or flight mode. So that's very important, and all the ways in which it impacts your health. When I took that assessment and I found out that I have 9 out of 10, I have 9 out of 10. I don't know what your score is. I don't ask you that. But I had 9 out of 10 when I took this a few years ago. And I knew I needed to do something different in my life because then I would be facing all of these health conditions. So understanding that is very important. When you have a staff person in your area, in your business, dealing with microaggressions, and they're calling out sick or something is wrong with them, this is why I have you take this so that you can understand when people are telling you that they are dealing with microaggressions at the job, you can understand what that means, or bias at the job. It's going to impact them. They're going to start calling out sick, and it's real. Understanding that it's real. Right? Understanding that society already has all of these schemas of unconscious biases happening. When we work in the organizations, it just transitions into your organization. It's not left out by the door because now they work in your organization. So understanding your business, people are dealing with this at work, right? We can't change stuff if we don't face it, and nothing can be changed until we face it. So understanding that is so important. So when we talk about hiring biases, and if I'm not able to get through this, I have the sheet which you can use. You can take that. There's 11 different kinds, right? When you're working in a search committee or when you have search committees working, there's biases that show up. You have confirmation bias, which means you only take in information that confirms your belief and ignore everything else. Right? So people experience that, right? You have affinity bias that people experience. This is where you identify with a candidate, so you base your similar or likable traits, so you act warmer towards them during the interview, you speak better towards them after the interview. So understanding that and being aware that you can have some affinity bias. You can have similarity bias, in-group bias. Similarity bias means you want to hire those that are most like you. And that's why we make sure we do a widespread to get diverse candidates. And we want to make sure that our committee is diverse too, the committee that's going to make that hiring decision or recommendation to the hiring supervisor or manager, because you want to make sure you counteract some of that, right? You always have the same people in the jobs because you need some diversity on the committee. Projection bias. You believe that others share your own goals, belief, etc. So you think they'll be good for the company. We always want to base skills, knowledge, and ability. We want to look at their resumes, base it off of that. When they come in the interview, are they able to articulate that they're able to do the job? You want to make sure you do that. We have the halo effect, is where you think that the same way, when you think that since the person is good at A, they will also be good at B, C, and D. If they don't demonstrate that, you can't really hire them based off of that. You got to hire them based off what they're presenting, right? You have the pitchfork effect. This is the opposite of the halo effect, where you see or hear something negative and then assume all of the candidates' traits are negative. That's why it's so important for the search committee to be able to get together and they can talk about what were the strengths and what were the limitations of the candidate. And that should be based off of the skills, the knowledge, and ability from the job description. Got to be able to look at that, right? So you have the status quo bias. It's where you like everything the way it is and you want to keep it that way. You got to break up some of that status quo, right? Figure out how do you do that. But also when you do that and you invite different individuals to work on your team or in your company or your business, then you also have to have wraparound services and support so that they are not the only one. And so they feel alienated because they're the only ones. You got to figure out ways to welcome them. And then you have the nonverbal bias, right? This is where you judge a candidate's ability to do the job based off of superficial traits like tattoos or body weight. You got to be careful. That's discriminatory practices. You got to be careful. They don't look the part. I don't know if they can do it. If they have the skills, the knowledge, and the ability, then they should be able to do it. Expectation anchor. You are convinced that an earlier candidate was the best for the job, so you don't take into consideration any other latter candidates, even while the search is still being connected. You got to be careful about that. Not stuck in the mud. And these are the last two, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I did go over, so please forgive me for that. You have contrast effect. The contrast effect happens when you see a ton of resumes or interviews in a row, and you start to compare how they are to the previous candidate, even though you should be comparing the individual skills and experiences to the job posting only. You can't compare candidates to each other. Compare it to the job posting, right? Conformity bias. This bias is where if you form a different opinion than the rest of the group, you're more likely to change your mind to agree with them. You don't want that. You don't want to change your mind. You want to stay strong. And this is why I believe this candidate should be here. And this is, you provide that and articulate that. So we're going to end here and we're going to open it up for Q&A. Thank you all so much for your engagement. And I look forward to hearing what questions you have.
Are there any questions anyone wants to share? If so, you could drop it in the chat or share it here. Dr. Sapp, I have the first one. How do you respond to "they aren't a good fit"?
You know, those words are very, very, you got to be very careful when you're using that. You know, good fit in what sense, right? If you're saying that you want to diversify your company, your department, your unit, then what is the fit? What's the culture and climate in those spaces, right? And if it's a person of color, or if it's a non-person who's a woman, or if, when you talk about gender, or if it's a person with an ADA accommodation, what's the fit, right? We look at the job description. If they have the skills, the knowledge, and ability to do that job, then they are a good fit. So I typically ask people, what do you mean by fit? Give me a little bit more, because I need them to understand how they are seeing this. Because when we say we want to diversify, if it's all one gender, then a good fit would be a person of that gender, wouldn't it? So we don't want that. We want people who know how to do the job, skills, knowledge, and ability. That's what we want. And so I always tell them to go back to the job description. And what way is this person not a good fit? Because they meet all of these criteria. When they came in for the interview, they answered the questions. What do you mean by fit? You define that for me.
Dr. Sapp, we have another one here. How do you deal with an employee who makes racist jokes, but your co-owner won't do anything other than repeated warnings?
That should go to HR to be able to deal with that, or your affirmative action, or Title IX, or Chief Diversity Officer. That needs to go to someone who could step in and do an investigation. Once they do that investigation, send that over to HR to do some disciplinary action. We're not going to continuously talk to you. You need to get to a level where we're going to get you trained or get you whatever you need if you still do this. Because when you think about it, you're impacting all the other people for this one person, right? And you also, if they are part of a collective bargaining unit, you bring them in. You give them a performance program of what your expectations are. And if they don't meet that, what's going to happen? And you do that probation, termination. Sometimes you got to get to that, right? Because you're going to be sued, right? If anyone goes outside of the company to any of the external agencies, the Civil Rights Agency, the Equal Employment Opportunity Agency, you're going to get sued. So you have to begin to look at risk. What is your risk, right? You got to look at that.
Dr. Sapp, I'm actually going to elaborate that on a little bit. If it is a co-owner, because that might be a bit more sensitive. And if it's some of our fellow small businesses that might not have an HR department directly, who do they go to, or is there any further action?
You can go to external agencies, or you may want to separate yourself from that person. You are going to decrease our business. Like, people are not going to come to us, right? That's just not going to happen, right? If you can continue to offend folks, or you may get a lawsuit and they can name you in that because you're complicit in allowing it to happen. So being a co-owner and your partner is doing this, you got to figure out how to separate from that if that person is going to continue to do that, because they can file a lawsuit against your company and you can be named in that, being complicit in that. And then where's that going to take your business, right? So the risk is going to be high. So you always have to look at the risk factor. And someone may be able, even if they find that you're not responsible or it doesn't rise to the level of the law, public opinion is going to kill that business, right? Oh, this is what you're doing. You're owning this. Why would I spend my money there, right? This is the cancel culture. They will cancel you in a minute. And so understanding that public opinion will probably weigh in as well, even if it doesn't rise to the level of the law, where when they filed a lawsuit with an external agency that this business owner is doing this, it's still public opinion, it's in record, and they be like, oh, if that's what you're doing, I'm not spending my money with you. So you're going to have to assess whether you want to be in business with that person.
We have two more. First one is, how can individuals and organizations reduce unconscious bias?
The only way is to really be trained. You need to bring it to your awareness. You need to be able to offer training so you can put it on their radar, continuously do the work, checking in, figuring out where does it show up, when it shows up. You know, when I do these trainings for businesses and companies when they have the entire company go through it so that it's on everybody's radar, and they create a culture and a climate where they are going to be able to have some dialogue when it happens, when they say we want to educate each other, right, and talk about this, when you're using those I statements and the language, right? I don't know if you are aware of this, but what you said is offensive. And then you can have a dialogue around it, right? So you can continuously learn. Even me, I've done some stuff. I've been doing this work for 20 years. And when I commit microaggressions, sometimes I can catch myself, right? Sometimes I can catch myself, but sometimes I'm not. I have to be open for my colleagues to say, I'm not sure if you know this, but did you know? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even recognize that. I apologize, just like it said in the video. Apologize, and then try make change. But you have to have a culture of you all no blame, shame, or guilt. We're going to work together as a department, as a unit, as a company to really combat microaggressions, to mitigate it. And that means that we have to continuously be in this together.
Last one. Do you have a good interview rating form to share with us that also helps remind committee members of bias?
What I do with yes, I have a form that I use, and what we do is we put the qualifications and the preferred qualifications on this rating form. And so when we're looking over resumes, do they meet it or not, right? So if you say you require a degree, a 3-year degree, you require this, you require that, but the most important part of that is the job description. Myself and HR look over every single job description because we want to make sure that it is equitable. We don't want you asking for stuff if that's not what you need. Why do you need 5 years of experience to do this job? If it is an entry-level experience job, then say 0 to 3 years. So you got to start with the job description. And so myself and HR, we look at that. And we make sure that the job description meets the needs of what you're looking for. You're not doing extra. You know, you need a master's degree when it's an entry-level position. And so we do some of that in the front end. And then once we get the job description right, and it is true to form of what we're looking for, we didn't put anything in that is biased against gender, that is biased against gender identity and sexuality, that is biased against ADA. When we do, you ask a person to lift 50 pounds. What are they lifting 50 pounds for? Do they need that? And so we got to make sure that the job description is on point. Then we take that job description and we put it on the form to rate resumes. We do the preferred qualifications and we do the qualifications. And if they meet those, and we also do open-ended questions at the end of each of when we're looking at the candidates. First of all, we don't put all the candidates on one form. They have their own form because we're not comparing candidates to each other. We're comparing them to the job description. And we also have open-ended questions to say, when you looked at their resume and their cover letter, how did they demonstrate that they met these qualifications? And so you can write it down uninhibited with anybody else. And then when you get together in the search committee and you decide who you're going to bring, you can have that dialogue uninterrupted of what you saw on the cover letter, what you saw on the resume, and you have that dialogue to say, okay, this is why I think this person should be brought in. And then you're plotting that down and you're having that honest dialogue, uninterrupted, because I looked at the information myself. And now that I looked at it, we're going to all come together and have a dialogue of why I think this person should be brought in. And then you move forward with that. And you're trusting that the search chairs are going to be responsible and make sure that everything is in order. And then you're moving that candidate forward. So yes, I do have a rating form, but it starts with the job description. You got to make sure that job description is appropriate of what you're looking for.
Thank you for that. Dr. Sapp, I'm not sure if your time permits, and in knowing that Earl has a few items he wants to share with the group, do you have time for one more question?
I do.
Okay. How does all this information help to improve the well-being of the company and the individuals in the organization?
because everyone will be on the same page, understanding that we are looking for diverse candidates. And the reason why we're looking for diverse candidates is because we know that it will benefit our company. Because when you're thinking about the clientele that you serve, if you have a diverse clientele, then you want diverse people to work in your company. And you also want innovative ideas to be able to push that out, your product, whatever you're producing for the community, whether it's locally, regionally, globally, worldwide, right? And so many businesses are growing, right? So much. You need people who have those lived experience and also expertise to be able to give you those ideas, to generate that, to produce the product, to make sure that you are servicing your customers because they're so diverse, right? You can't look at a person and know all of their hidden. So you see that some of these are hidden characteristics and some of them are visible characteristics. You can't just look at a person and tell who they are, right? So you can't just look at a customer or a client and know what their needs are. You need to be able to meet their needs in different ways. And you do that when you have a diverse team, right? But you also have to make sure you're welcoming your diverse team and embracing them and supporting them and being able to get the work done, and that their work environment is conducive to allowing them to feel like they can work there, that they belong there, that they have a sense of belonging, right? And so understanding that is so important.
Dr. Sapp, I'm going to say on behalf of the chamber, thank you so much for sharing and engaging our audience today. I think many will find that it was very much useful. And I am actually going to turn it over to Earl now to close us out. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
I'd just like to second that. Thank you. Really appreciate this informative time. This hour has felt like 2 hours. And we still feel like there's so much more to cover. So we do look forward to engaging you again. I want to thank, as a member of the chamber, I want to thank Heather, the board, and the staff, first of all, for the establishing of the DEAI committee, for their support that has enabled us to host this event today. And we want to also thank each and every one of you for participating. And we want to mention that we are in the process of recruiting additional committee members. So if you are interested in this work, reach out to the office and let us know. We'll be in contact with you. Also, your feedback on today. We'd like to hear your thoughts on what this experience has meant, its value, and any ideas that you have concerning future lunches and learning. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Sapp.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.